Hello, everyone. Welcome to the December 2025 offering of FFTA. I'm Dr. Annalyn Schooley, and I can't be more thrilled to introduce my colleague and longtime friend, Carol Messmore, who is a fellow instructor or uh, full professor, I should say, at Capella University. And one of the few people that I know who's an expert in 0 to 3 work with small children. So, Carol, please tell us a little bit about what you got into 0 to 3 and your presentation on when a baby is the client. Oh, I've lost your audio. That's weird. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you. I
Yes.
can't hear her.
Okay, all of a sudden we lost your audio, Carol. Do you have another headset or something? Or a different mic? Because you were working just seconds ago. Technology is not our friend tonight. It's everybody must be online doing their Christmas shopping. I asked all my students if their Christmas shopping was done, and they all looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, can you seriously? My shopping is done, so not something. Uh, all right, I swear, the technology was working moments ago. I started recording, and we lost her audio. Well, I'll just continue to sing more praises. Carol was not only on the COAMFTE board, but she was the chair of COAMFTE and was one of the folks that really expanded COAMFTE's ideas about online education for marriage and family therapists right before the pandemic when everybody had to be online. So she was right smack dab in the middle of all of that when it happened. So she's done tremendous service to the field through her work with COAMFTE. I know she's a site visitor and works with education programs across the country. I know she has been a supervisor and currently does online clients through the platforms. We were just talking about that. I did not know most of the people who do online work now tell me they get mostly individuals. Carol, you said that you have almost exclusively couples. So that's fascinating. So it looks like you've moved to your phone audio, and but you are now muted with that phone. So if we can get you unmuted, we can carry on. It's the Christmas gremlins. We must be close to Krampusnacht. And some of us have been bad or something. We're being
Can you hear
punished.
me now, Ann?
Yes, very softly. Yes.
Is this any better?
It is better. You sound like you're a little like you're in a tunnel, but we do hear you. I'll just crank up the volume on my headset.
Okay, if you start hearing an echo, let me know in case my audio from my computer all of a sudden starts again.
It's a deal.
So I
It's a deal.
apologize. We've just been talking.
Yeah.
So
Weird. It's weird.
It's weird. So I got my license in Florida as a marriage and family therapist and had never worked with very young children, never even heard of infant mental health. And while the common people think 0 to 3, that's of course national 0 to 3, the big association, it's really 0 to 6. We train for 0 to 6. So kind of preschool, prior to kindergarten. So I was working for a funded social service agency, Children's Services Council. If you're in Florida, you might have a Children's Services Council or Child Trust in your community. They're paid by tax dollars. So I worked for an agency and maternal child health. And so the Palm Beach County Children's Services Council decided that they needed infant mental health specialists and put out a call for licensed clinicians to apply for full scholarship to the Florida State University Harris Institute. So Irving Harris funded these postgraduate training programs around the country. So we always said Irving Harris got his money off the Tony Perms. Remember, you used to get those Tony Perms in the kitchen? That's how he made all his money. And he and his wife really saw the value in child development and infant mental health. So they founded these Harris centers. So Florida State University has a huge child development center, and the Palm Beach County Children's Services Council brought them to Palm Beach County. And we had these training boot camps. And so there were probably 20 of us in the initial class, and it was completely free. They paid for all our training. And I remember I was in the doc program at Nova, and I went in to see my professor, who is on my dissertation committee, and said, you know, I got this opportunity. Should I do it? And he said, infant mental health, what is that? I said, I'm not quite sure. And he goes, how much does it cost? I said, it's free. Do it. It's free. So I thought, okay. And it changed my life. It changed my whole practice. And it was quite a dance that I did. I was so lucky with the trainers, just the phenomenal faculty, Ann Hogan and from Florida State, her husband, Herb Quay, Joy Osofsky, who was past president of 0 to 3, was actually my supervisor, my reflected supervisor for the 2 years. I did 1 year the regular training, and then I applied and was accepted into an advanced training where we had to bring in our recordings and review the recordings with our training cohort. So they're all psychologists. And here I am, the systemic marriage and family therapist, the only marriage and family therapist in the group. And I'm trying to not pathologize and trying to fit this around. And Joy was so great. She sat with me, and we started through Bowen. And I'm a solution-focused postmodern. So we started at Bowen, and we walked forward and got to where I was comfortable and I could interpret these interventions and apply them. So the training was just phenomenal. It was very hands-on. We did lots of observations. So I had to every week observe infants for, I think it was 7 hours a week. I had to go to certain locations, playgrounds. I had to have a friend with an infant where I could go to their home and just watch, so that we were learning how typical behavior happens. And then we would have lectures, and it just was a very intensive training. So that's how I got into it. And because they paid for my tuition, I had to give back to the community. So I worked for the Department of Children and Families, and I worked foster care families. I did assessments of children who were removed from their families that were under 5. So I did the behavioral health assessments. And then I helped with reunification. So I'd have foster moms and the bio moms. We're going back 20 years. There were not a lot of dads. So it was mostly focused on moms and grandmoms. So we would do the reunification and do exercises and interventions to help the bonding and structure. So that's how I started. But then I branched out with my practice. I pulled away from the Department of Children and Families. It's a pretty high burnout rate if you stay with the high-risk families. And you end up in court all the time. They just love calling in therapists. You all know that. So I would see families with children under the age of 5 for all different whatever was going on. So we would have, a lot of divorce, separation, or death of a parent, any kind of thing happen. So I never saw anyone older than 5. It changed my whole practice. And then when COVID hit was when I don't do infant mental health right now because I'm only doing telehealth, and I'm on my way. I'm on my way to not working. So I didn't want to open an office again. You need a lot of supplies to work with young children. And so, hey, Lynn. So I now see adults. So, but it really was a fascinating time. And when I started, no one knew what infant mental health was. Even at Department of Children and Families, they'd go in and they would not think that an infant would have any impact of watching one parent harm the other parent, or being stuck in a corner in a little carrier all day in a crack house, that the child just wouldn't remember. And that is not true. So the infants have memory. They just remember and process differently than we do because their brain is not at the same developmental stage as ours. And so it will carry forward. So the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, is exactly, that's why we need to be looking at the infants, because if it's not addressed and not supported, the children will grow up into adults who have health issues, mental health issues, all, the different things that they found with the ACEs. So it's nice to see now. Back when I started, Michigan was the only state. They were the forerunners. Deborah Weatherston, who is big in infant mental health, is from Michigan. She started the Michigan Association of Infant Mental Health. They were the only large association. They created the standards of care for infant mental health. Now there's infant mental health associations all over the country. Florida has their own infant mental health. And in Florida, we have endorsement. So I used to call myself an infant mental health specialist, which I could from my training that I had. However, now there's an endorsement, and I didn't go through the endorsement. I'm done doing that. So I don't call myself an infant mental health specialist because I don't have the endorsement, and I don't want to take away from those who have worked so hard now. So it's really a major step for Florida to have done that. It's really, and you'll see it in almost every state. It's great to see that there's so much more attention being given. So I do have some slides, and please, as I said, interrupt me at any time, okay, with questions. Let's see. Here we go. Oops. Of course, I'm not on the beginning. Okay. So now I can't see you.
So we
So-
see it, but there are gray boxes on top of things.
There are gray boxes.
Okay, this is better. We're better now.
Should I do it on the slideshow? Would that be better?
Let's give it a try.
How's that?
Pretty
Anything
good.
happen? Okay.
Yep, it got it bigger. Yep.
Okay. So here are the learning interventions. We're going to talk about observational skills, and develop is a pretty lofty word, but we're going to talk about the observational skills that as a family therapist. So this is not infant mental health. So this is not an infant mental health training. I'm talking about infant mental health so you understand a little bit about very young children, and then understand what kind of therapeutic interventions can you use in your room when you have infants and toddlers. So the interesting thing, because this is not the first time I've used this presentation, but I went to update the literature because you'll see here it's 1990. There's really no one has done the research to get a percentage of the number of family therapists. So back in 1990, 70% of family therapists didn't include children in a session. Or if they did, they stuck them in the corner. And I remember that in my training. It used to be who drew the short straw and was going to go to the waiting room with the kid and color in a coloring book or sit with them and show them a picture book. So I was not trained to include young children who were pre-verbal in a session. And so even as the field, it has grown, and now there are many more infant mental health specialists, especially, I think the marriage and family field has a lot of them now. Infants and toddlers are still not included in the family sessions. These are two different, Opie et al., they're two different articles I'm citing, but it's from the Australian and New Zealand Family Therapy Journal or Family Journal. They did a special issue just on infant mental health and family therapy. So I have a link in the on the last slide. If you want, they're fascinating. Every single article in that journal is interesting. So they still were saying that family therapists are not, and probably because we're not trained to work with children under 5. It's not in our competence. It's not in COAMPT's competencies to learn about children under the age of 5. It's not in KCREP's competencies, and it's not in CSWE's competencies. So if it's not in the competency, you don't stick it in your program because there just isn't the luxury to have all of those extra classes. You need to have as few credits as you can, so you are focusing on the models and the clinical training. So we're just not trained. So unless someone goes, like I did, takes a postgraduate training, you're not going to have any awareness. So you are going to leave them outside. So it is important for us to understand and be curious about the kids that come in with our families. Okay, so now this gives you an idea. I have two, they're short. This first one is 5 minutes, so it is longer. Let me just check. Okay, science of neglect. Okay. Let me clean that up and go back in and share. This is John Shonkoff talking about neglect and some of the observational tools that are used. The reason I think this is important is so that you can see how the babies react and hear the conversation. So here we go. I am just a little concerned about the sound now, Anna Lynn, because
we'll see.
Okay. So that's Boston, because this is through Harvard University.
Everyone
in
a community has a vested interest in everyone else's children, because everyone else's children determine the next adult population that makes for a successful society. Built into our biology is the need to have responsive interactions with adults.
Neglect for children is when they don't get what the brain is expecting to get, what the child is expecting to get, what we are biologically prepared and waiting for, which is input from those around us.
It's this back and forth serve and return interaction that literally shapes the architecture of the brain.
Serve and return begins when a child looks at something or observes something, makes an utterance, and that represents the serve. And the return is when the parent notices the child doing these things and responds to the child.
Under conditions where serve and return is broken, you literally are pulling away what is the essential ingredient of the development of human brain architecture.
It was a really compelling series of experiments where they started by videotaping the mother and the baby engaging in cooing and smiling. And then they asked the mother to basically put on a blank face and not respond at all. When a baby is not attended to, that is a sign of danger to the baby biologically. So the stress systems become activated.
In a brain that is constantly bathed in stress hormones, not that's up and down, that comes with normal development, certain synapses, the connections between nerves, fail to form, and critical regions of the brain.
So neglect both fails to provide the stimulation that's needed to develop the basic architecture, and when it's at a certain level, is one of the most potent activators of the stress biology of a young child. So you get a double whammy.
Science points to 4 categories of this spectrum of neglect. The first category would be what's called occasional inattention, where children experience responsiveness most of the time, but occasionally adults don't respond. There's no harm in that, and in fact, there's probably some benefit.
A child can learn to self-soothe and explore the environment, and all of those opportunities build brain architecture.
The second category, scientists would call chronic understimulation, is where on a regular basis, children have less interaction with the adults around them than is needed for healthy development.
Those children typically, when provided with enriched learning opportunities and more typical levels of serve and return, will show catch-up.
The third category is what science would call severe neglect in a family where not only are there prolonged periods of inattention and lack of responsiveness, but often also associated with not being fed enough, not being bathed enough, not having basic needs met.
Neglect is a huge problem in the U.S. Children are much more likely to be neglected than they are to experience any other kind of maltreatment.
We see the child really being at risk for much more substantial kinds of deficits down the road that don't necessarily get easily fixed or ameliorated. This is where we really need to think about more complicated and often more intensive strategies to help undo those effects.
The fourth category, called severe neglect, generally found in institutional settings, is a result of children living in kind of warehoused type situation in orphanages.
And it doesn't have to even be as extreme as orphanages. It can be experiences that are regretfully occurring in many, many parts of our country.
Often institutional care in this country is under the euphemistic name of transitional care or temporary care or assessment facilities.
If you think about what institutional care would look like for an infant, where there's somebody new coming on to the shift every 8 hours, it really alters the development of the child's brain architecture and other aspects of the child's development.
We have the potential to change children's developmental trajectories.
Interventions can apply to parents, to foster parents or adoptive parents, childcare settings, Head Start settings, and other kinds of settings. And really, what they're about is attuning people to the serve and return process.
Neglecting young children is neglecting the foundations of a healthy next generation. The community pays a huge price later in terms of the problems of the next generation, whether it be educational achievement, economic productivity, good citizenship, the ability to parent the next generation. all of the things that have to do with a healthy, prosperous society.
Okay. All right. So that's the value, and it wasn't seen. I mean, yet John Shonkoff has been working in infant mental health as Brenda Jones Harden for 35 years, but it wasn't recognized by the people that were seeing the children come into their offices with these parents. So the children that were severe, really, like the children that were in an orphanage and or in poor care settings, would come in for therapy themselves, and then the therapist would see a single child, an infant, take the child from the caregiver and work with that child, which is not best practice. So the child's not feeling safe. If you like these kinds of, like the still face video, so we used to do the still face video. I do the newborn observation tool, that just the number of different assessments. There are great videos now on YouTube. Even you can find some of the European, it's from the 40s, the orphanages from the World War II orphanages really was very traumatic, and it shows you that extreme. Even in London, the famous one, we would sit and cry sometimes in our training watching them. In London, it was common for when women would give birth and they had other children, the children would then be sent to a care center for a couple weeks. So, and then the fathers would go, they're heterosexual, was a while ago, would go visit the child. And so they showed this one little boy, about 3.5 years old, healthy, happy, stable family, very appropriate responses in day one. And then they showed as he progressed through the 2 weeks, and he just completely fell apart. He was crying, he was listless, not responding, from not being, he didn't have the attention, he didn't have the serve and return. They say that's like a tennis statement. It's like, so the baby serves by babbling or pointing, and then the caregiver responds by either nodding or looking. You don't need to have language with babies. They can tell by your face. And if you've had children, your kids understand what is going on just by looking at you. If you're having a bad day and you walk in the house, those kids know. Same thing, Annalyn, your cats probably know too. So, if you don't need to have language for children to understand what's going on. So when the parents are telling you, we never argue in front of our kids, or it's just a baby, they don't know. They do know. They do know. They can tell what's going on. So I
just wanted to comment that the very same videos was used by Susan Johnson to talk about attachment in her EFT work. She used the very same study, the unexpressive face stuff. Yeah.
Is very, so Ed Tronick I also am a Brazelton, the same Children's Services Council, became a Touch Points community. So I'm a Brazelton faculty member to train the providers in Palm Beach County. And Ed Tronick is involved with, or was involved with, Touch Points in Boston. And so he's the one that did the still face, the original still face. And at that time, I remember asking him how come he never used fathers. And he thought that was like the stupidest question he'd ever gotten in his whole life. But I was very heartened when I went looking for videos on YouTube out of Yale. There's a whole process of still face with fathers, and it's the same result. It's the same result. So still face is fascinating. There's a visual clip which is a fascinating, where the children, it looks like they would fall, but it's plexiglass. If you have a parent or caregiver that's trusted on the other side saying, come on, the child will do it. But if they do a fear face, oh no, whoa, then the child will stop. So it's just, they're fascinating, these different observations. And there's tons of these on YouTube. So you can just go type in infant observation video and you'll find all kinds of things. They're just really fascinating. This next one, though, is powerful because it shows you a mother's reactions to her child. And so these are the kinds of things that you will see in your therapy room. You'll also see out in the community. Some of this is once you understand what you're looking at, you never unsee it. Even my husband, who is not a therapist, he is not a therapist at all, but he has been with me many times. And I'm like, come on, I got to go to a park and observe. I've got to go, and we have a child. He's a great father. He will sit and he'll go, look at that little one over there. What's going on with that little one? So let me get this one. Let's see. Okay, there it is. Now I have to share. There it is. Okay, are you seeing it?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not hearing it yet, but I am seeing it.
It's got the circle of death.
There we go. I heard something.
Parents often react inconsistently to their baby's distress. Sometimes they can be loving, other times they are angry, and at other times they may ask their child to worry about them.
All the time.
Watch this mother's response to her child's crying.
Stop that! I don't want you to do that. Stop it, again.
Here's another example.
Honey, you scared me. I thought something terrible had happened. Come here now. Mommy was just so scared. Make Mommy feel better. Give Mommy a hug. Make Mommy feel better.
As you can see, once when this baby hurt himself, his mother got angry.
Stop that!
And another time, the mother got more upset than the baby.
You scared me. I thought something terrible had happened.
By doing that, whether she meant to or not, the message the mom gave her baby was that her own needs were more important than her baby's. These babies stop going to their parents for comfort because they don't want to upset their parents. It's important to remember it's not up to a baby to meet a parent's needs. It's the other way around. It's up to you to meet your baby's needs. A child who gets a loving response only some of the time has to work very hard, often by clinging and whining to get their mother's attention. They don't know what to expect from their parent and are not sure how to get love and affection. They can become very demanding. In the long term, children who are unsure about themselves and their parents are likely to have problems getting along with other people.
Saying our name?
Here's another way this mother could have responded to her child. See how this time the mom focuses on the baby's needs. See how she paid attention to her baby, calmly picked him up, held him close, and reassured him. She responded to her child in a loving way, and a baby whose parent responds in this loving way learns that he can count on his parent to be there when he needs her. Babies whose mothers respond in a loving way learn to trust that their needs will be respected and valued, and they, in turn, learn to respect and value other people's needs. In other words, they can go on to form good, close relationships with their parents and with others.
So she probably showed that one too, right? So that I I don't show those videos to blame moms. So this is not about parent shaming, because parents do the best they can with what they have. And even, I mean, I don't know how many, hundreds of parents I've worked with who have harmed their child. Not one parent thought that was a good idea. They just didn't know what else to do. So when you saw that mom first making it about her, you scared me. Make mommy feel better. Come, let me hold you. She didn't mean ill. You know, it was, that's just what she knew. And so it must have been some type of parenting course she was in where they were teaching them how to hold the baby in mind, where she learned the different soothing methods. So it's not about parent shaming, but you will see this in your room. And so what does that mean? You know, what can you infer? You have to, one, you're curious about the child's reactions. When you see a child either crying and like there's really no reason to cry, and this child is just throwing themselves down on the floor, watch how the caregiver, whoever is there, responds. And it's also interesting watching who the child goes to. Sometimes they may go to an older sibling and not to the parent. That tells you that the parent is not the one giving them the comfort. So if they're upset, they're going to go to who comforts them, and it's often an older sibling. The parent just there's other things happening. So the child may have come in as the problem, but there's something going on in that parent's life that's interfering with them being able to comfort and parent that child. So I do have, I don't know, but there's, I have cases. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. So I feel like I'm skipping around. If I skip right through, there we go. If I skip to the cases, I might skip information that might be good to. Okay. Now, are you seeing the screen? Oh, why did it do that?
Not yet.
Not yet. Let me do it again. We didn't have these technical issues before. How about now?
Yes.
Okay. So these are some pretty crazy statistics, that 9.4% of children under 5, so almost 10% of children. So if you're seeing children under 5 walk into your therapy room, there's a 10% chance that they've experienced 2 or more adverse childhood experiences. And so that is like abuse, neglect, but it can just be household dysfunction, which it's a pathological word, but that's termed where there's been divorce, or there's been severe arguments between family members, or just a lack of comfort, or maybe it's a lack of food or safety issues. So there's a whole list of adverse childhood experiences, and so you can 10% of the kids under 5 you're seeing have at least 2, and that will make them at risk of chronic health issues, lower academic achievement, and mental health issues as they age, as they become teens, as well as adults. The next data just floors me, that 250 children are under the age of 5 are expelled from preschool childcare each day in the U.S. That's 3 times the number of K through 12 children who are suspended or expelled. So 250 little ones are expelled from preschool or childcare, which then causes stress on their parents. And if you look at that data, Black children are half of the children expelled. So 125 of those children, each expelled each day, are Black. Yet the population, if you're looking at the number of children, you're looking at the population of preschool childcare children, Black children do not make up half of that population. It's a smaller percentage. So they are being, which it follows through in schools too, and especially boys. Black, African American, or Black boys of color are more likely to be suspended or expelled from K through 12, but they're 4.5 times more likely to be expelled from childcare. So and child health data has all kinds of data. It's a fascinating that, and Children's Defense Fund, they break it down by the state. So if you want to find out what's happening in your state, it is fascinating, but also a little scary that this number of children are being expelled. So how can you be helpful as a therapist? You all know this, the children are the symptom bearers of the family. They do not have the brain development, the emotional development to handle what they're seeing and experiencing, so it comes out in behaviors. So they bring the families in. They bring their families into therapy, and they're the problem child. So here are some things and this is I'll share this PowerPoint. So what you're looking, it's like, look, if you look at this little infant at the top, totally non-responsive. Totally non-responsive. If you see an infant like that, it's to be really concerned if they don't have emotions. That's why it's helpful just to go to a playground or go somewhere and watch children of different ages, and you get to see the typical behaviors, the tantrums, the screaming, the smiling, the laughing. So that way, when you see a child that's not showing emotion, it kind of jars you and you are curious about it. Or the child is not able to self-soothe and they can't calm. Even if they're little with a pacifier or with a toy, they just cannot calm. Or they're on guard, they're always on edge. But it makes you wonder what is going on in that household. The same thing of the little one that runs up and hugs you, because there should be a certain level of stranger danger. That's another one of the observational videos that's really interesting to watch, is the strange situation. So children with typical attachment don't run up and hug strangers. They're a little wary about them. So if a child crawls in your lap and you've just met them, it's something to be a little concerned about. So these signs, they're similar across the ages of infant, toddler, and preschooler, but a little different. Like the toddlers should start to be talking. They have better mobile skills, so you could see different things, more independent play with the toddlers, and then with preschoolers. So preschoolers might regress in their development. That's a real sign if you have a preschooler in your room and they wet their pants. You might want to be really curious about what's going on with that. And this is what we saw, or what we heard about too, the caregiver. If they're not interested, their child is just screaming on the floor, and they just have no interest in that child. It's not that they're, there's one thing, I'm just going to let my child have the tantrum, and when they're done, we're going to walk out of the store, or I'm going to pick them up and walk them out. But this is just a parent who is just not even involved, not watching, not looking at the tantrum, just letting that child do what they want. They're not touching, holding, they're not talking, or they're angry at the child. the lack of joyful interactions is something that it really was meaningful to me when I took that training, because my goal when I worked with the families was so that they would enjoy their child, so that every parent, they want to enjoy their child. And how can I help them as a therapist get to the point where the family's enjoying each other? So, let's see. I wish I could see you. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you. So this is my first case, really interesting. I was an older mom. I had my baby at 41. And a geriatric mom is actually what they call you. So, and now it's a little more common for women over 30. If you're over 35, you're in geriatric pregnancy. So it's more common now. But when I had my son, it really wasn't as common. And so my practice sort of bloomed into being, I worked with a lot of moms who had babies after the age of 35. So, so this actually was a referral from a friend of mine who was an infant mental health specialist. We went through the training together, and it was her cousin. The woman had gotten married and then through IVF, pregnant with twins within 2 years. So she gave birth to twins and got married and left her job. She was in a very high level position and had worked her whole life. And one baby was able to be discharged shortly after she was discharged. Both went into the NICU, but she went home and one baby came home with her. The other baby was failure to thrive. He was sent to Miami, and she lived in Boca. So there's 50 miles before Bright Line. So it was a trek, and she had a C-section, so she wasn't really in shape to jump in a car and drive down to Miami every day. Her husband was working. There's no father paternity leave. So here's a baby all by themselves in NICU in Miami. And she's got her little girl at home. My friend gets her Christmas card from her cousin, and it has one baby on the front. And she panicked and thought the little boy passed away. She called her cousin right away, and she said, "Oh no, he's just a problem." And so she called me up. She goes, "My cousin said she'll see you. You've got to go to her house." So I went to the house, and she would be she'd have the little baby girl, and she'd be cooing at her and holding her. And the little boy, who was just over 4 pounds, just out of NICU in Miami, is lying in a carrier, just sitting there. And so I just observed that first visit, she didn't try to rock his carrier. I mean, she fed him. He was clean. They had everything. I mean, money was not an issue for this couple. Dad wasn't home. She did have some postpartum depression. She did have that. So that was an underlying issue. And she was not bonding with this little baby. He was very listless. So what I did was I said, let's hold the babies. Let's get the babies out. I started out holding the baby boy, and she held the baby girl, and then we swapped. So she held him more, and as he was held more, he was less difficult because he was getting the attention. And then we could talk about what was going on. Well, yeah, this was a woman who had, 3 assistants. She had a housekeeper. She had a day timer. I mean, her day was set and run, and she was successful, and people came to her for things. And she thought she wanted to be a full-time stay-at-home mom. And you know what? She didn't. She didn't enjoy being a full-time stay-at-home mom. And so she was really struggling with feeling like she should enjoy it. Well, why don't I? Am I a fit? So we processed all of those. So it really ended up being about her. But there was a little issue with that little one. If I had not had my infant mental health training, I would have asked her if she could find somebody to watch the kids while she came to my office. But instead, that also helped her see that, yes, she was a good mom. Her children did respond, so I could note, oh, look how he turns when you're talking. Oh, no, he doesn't want me to hold him. He wants you to hold him. Oh, my gosh, she does too. So she would be holding both of them and feed him. I'm like, I don't know, how are you feeding these? How do you do this? And she'd show me how she gets them to take the bottle, and she knew what she was doing, so she could feel successful as a mom, and that it was okay to not want to be a stay-at-home mom. You didn't have to be a stay-at-home mom. She could do some kind of work. She ended up going back, and she was in HR doing consulting, so she didn't work her same 60, 80-hour week with business suits and travel and all of that. She was more of a consultant, so she could set her day, but it was much better. It was much better for her. So that, I thought, was a good example to show of what might come into your office. And it would be easy to not include the babies, but they ended up being an integral part of the work. Now, I did go to her home. She didn't come to my office for that one. The next case I had that was really fascinating came in through a referral for the child, and I did see at my office that the child was 2.5, again, an older mom. I think, typecast. Oh, send him to Carol. She's an older mom. Send those old moms to Carol. So it was an older mom, and first baby, first marriage, worked her whole life, but she continued to work. She didn't stop working. She came in because the little one was speech delayed, language delayed, and was very aggressive and violent. I'm looking at this little one coming in, little adult come in, and she sits down and she's playing. I'm like, wow, aggressive and violent. And that was the presenting issue. Nothing with mom. And so I asked for more information, tell me what's going on, and mom did not get on the floor to play with her. And so I always had lots of toys. And I found some of my adult clients wanted to play with the dollhouse. They didn't have to come in with a kid, but they'd see that dollhouse and they get on the floor and start playing. Well, people talk more when they move. I learned that from my touch points, my Brazelton. T. Barry Brazelton would say that if you want somebody to talk, give them something, a Rubik's Cube or pipe cleaners or a fidget thing, and they'll start talking. So I always had stuff all around my office that the adults could pick up or the kids. So little one, she's playing on the floor, and mom told me that she would try to strangle her. I'm thinking, wow, she's all of like 18 pounds, and 2 feet tall. She tries to strangle you. Wow. Let's talk about that. I knew that she had developmental delays, so she didn't always have control over her physical movements or understand, what she was doing. She'd go to hug her mother and she'd just wrap her arms around her neck and hug her. But mom would she would freeze and get really tense. Well, mom had been in several abusive relationships prior to, she was not in an abusive relationship at that time, but she had never gone to therapy to talk about the abusive relationship. She did not link the two. So her child was not trying to strangle her, but that was her immediate concern. So she was having trouble developing a relationship with her little girl because she thought she was trying to hurt her, like her past relationships had. And her husband came in, or the father came in, because I wanted to make sure she really wasn't in a violent relationship at that time, but just had wonderful family sessions with everyone. And we would all get on the floor. She started getting down on the floor and playing and feeling more comfortable when she understood the developmental process with her little one. And certainly language. I mean, that's a big thing when they come in, oh, they bite. Well, all kids bite. All kids bite. It doesn't mean they're going to be this awful person. All kids bite. And often, so my first question is, are they language delayed? Because if you're delayed in language, you have trouble asking for a toy or saying what you want. So what do? You bite. Mm-hmm. It gets a great reaction. You know, it's easy, it's fast, you get what you want, because whoever you bite drops the toy. So, you know, that's language delay is a big one. So she had a language delay, and she would bite or be a little aggressive with other children. So mom just she wasn't really thinking on that. And then she was triggered. She was triggered by the little one's hands around her neck. So it's fascinating. And that could end up in your office. I have another, this was a case I supervised that I thought was
Carol,
really.
before you move off of the second one, could I ask you a few questions about this?
Oh, yeah,
around that? Okay. So so you said that that over time everybody was on the floor and you were having your session there. Who initiated that? Did you say let's all get on the floor, or how did you shift to that?
Yeah, so a lot of times when there's a little one in the room, I start out on the floor. Well, I'll
So
sit
the
in my chair.
minute the kid comes in, you're on the floor.
Yeah. And looking up, talking to mom, and then sometimes they'll come right down too, and we're all on the floor. Or sometimes they'll say, come on down, look at this. She's really having fun with this. Come down and see this. And the parent, so some of them are just, oh, no. Oh, so that gives you an idea there's not a lot of play going on in the family. One observation that we used to do is we had a mirror in the where I was doing my training. So I would sit behind the mirror, watch the family play. You would just say, you all go in there, I'll be in about 10 minutes. And then you watch and see what happens. And they know you're watching. It's not anything secret. You just say, I'm going to be back here. I just have to get some stuff together and I'll be in about 10 minutes. And that's a long time. So you see what they do. Do they play? Do they interact? And then you go in, you do 15 minutes or so talking in a session. And then you say, you know what? I want you to play. Here's some toys. You could either use this ball. I mean, there are some set assessments where you give exact things they're supposed to do. And then you go back and you watch. So if sometimes the parent, because they know they're being watched and they're supposed to play, will try to play with the child, and the child will go, huh? What? And that tells you right away there's not a lot of interaction that's going on. There's no serve and return. There's no reciprocity in that relationship. So kids got something going on that you need to attend to, but so does the parent. There's a reason the parent's doing that. There's something going on in that parent's life that is not allowing them to engage with the child. They love their child. So it's intervening on both sides. What's happening? How can I help you enjoy being a parent? And how can we help this little one not grow up to have chronic mental health issues, what all of those things the ACEs say, you know? So it really is just watching. And I think as systemic family therapists, we're trained to do that. We don't have a hard time looking for patterns of interaction. I think if you're not trained systemically, it's a little more challenging to look for those patterns. But we can just sit back and watch and see what's going on. Where's that child moving to? Who are they looking at? Who are they not looking at? Who do they maybe jump when they start talking? Or do they whip their head around and look? You know, I mean, it's just the little ones without language tell you exactly what's going on in the family because they have no idea that they're supposed to lie. They're not supposed to go in and say everything is great and you know, there are no problems. Because they don't have language, and the families don't tell them what they're supposed to say to Dr. Messmore. Where older kids are told, this is what you're going to say. When Dr. Messmore asks you this, this is what you're going to say. Okay, Mom. Okay. Little ones don't know that, so you get a lot more out of them. So you just have to watch. You have to watch.
So you did a lovely job of talking about the things for us to watch for that kind of tell us what is happening dynamically in the family. And then there's the intervention. Maybe that's a later on, but I'm thinking that I have a lot of students who would go immediately into psychoed. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what else.
So it's intervention. So let's say, the mom who thought her daughter was trying to strangle her. So our interventions, first I wanted to get Mom to play. And play can look like many different things, you know, so just basic. So it's a good enough. We're looking for good enough parenting. We're not looking for over the top. We want good enough. Okay. It's hard to be a parent. You all, if you have kids, you know that. In some days you're thrilled that you can be good enough. You know, it's okay to be good enough. You're not going to be AAA. So if you can get them playing with their child and touching the child, laughing, positive, looking at the child, and doing that serve and return. The child picks up something and the parent says, oh, look at that, you picked up the horse. Oh, that's a pretty horse. What are you going to do? And then the child does something with, oh, look at the horse is going over to the car. Oh, so they're interacting, and that's your intervention. Because then the parent is starting a relationship with that child. The child is seeing that their parent is actually paying attention to them. And then you can also start weaving in what you need to talk to the adult about. You know, what is it, your concerns or talking about them. But play is the main intervention. It's okay to play. And you can do all kinds of play. You can do card games. The Dollhouse was by far the favorite. But I also had, this is that game, Go Fish. You can get it in Publix, in Walgreens, in Target. It used to be like $3.99. Where it's a little battery-operated fishing pond with these little fish. They hop up and down and you catch them. Well, I wrote emotions on all the fish. So everyone, we go fishing. And if you pull out the emotion, you can't do this with pre-verbal. So this would be like your kindergartners, your preschoolers, or even older kids liked it too. Whatever emotion you got, sad, talk about a time you felt sad. And the parent does it too, and they hear things from their children. They had no idea that the children were experiencing these emotions at those times, and the children never knew their parents actually experience emotions. So there's a lot of sharing that goes back and forth. So that's another intervention. Just play play itself is something that can make a huge movement in families with little ones. So I started hiding Easter eggs, after the little plastic eggs, putting things in them, either a little toy or little questions again, hide them around my office. And I go, okay, there's 5 eggs. You have to find them. And the kids would go running around and they'd gather the eggs and they'd put them on the table. And then with their parent, they would go through and either uncover a prize or there'll be questions. And the parent would have to read the question and then they answer as a family. They're kind of reflective questions. What was the most fun you had as a family this week? What is something you want to do with your sister next week? So you just think of some very generic questions, or sometimes you just frame them for the case that you have. But the kids love it and they get involved, and then they actually want to come to therapy because they get to play, and the parent sees therapy. It's kind of like a Virginia Satir kind of thing. Sees therapy as more organic, not as I'm going to sit on a couch and tell this person all my problems and I'm a bad person. That it's actually more of a fun, interactive experience, and they walk out happy, which they usually walk in not so happy. And they see their children laughing, which is not something they always are able to see. So the play is pretty basic. I mean, the interventions are pretty basic, just play. And so you're still being a therapist. Just play.
So I have a colleague who is a play therapist. She's not an MFT. And we have regular arguments because she advertises herself as a play therapist. This is what she does. And what she does is she brings the kids in and plays with them and leaves the parent out. And I'm constantly arguing with her about bring the parent in. She goes, no, the parent is so toxic. I want them out. And I'm like, what? But yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
this is the difference between the way play therapy is kind of characterized and infant and toddler and child mental health is, because it's the same stuff, but the focus is different. I guess that's what's different.
Right. As I'm looking, or we are systemic, we're looking at the system. We're looking at the reason this child is responding to the system. The parent is responding to the system. So we need to see what's going on so we can change the pattern of interaction, interrupt it or reorganize it, whatever your model. I'm a solution-focused therapist. I want to know what the parent would rather see, so how are we going to do that? But play therapy, which is very, very good, there's very good evidence-based, they take them into a room, and it's also very, you picked up the ghost. Oh, now you have the horse. Oh, you have the chicken. We kind of connect some dots when we're doing this. Mom, did you know she really liked those chickens? No, I didn't know she liked chicken. Wow. Mom, do you want to get a chicken? Yeah, I'm going to get a chicken. Now we've got more chickens. We create a story when we're looking at that pattern. So I never called myself a play therapist. I know, because in Florida you can. I don't know if it's an actual license, but it isn't.
But it's like a certification, but it's be in the scope of practice that you shouldn't call yourself a play therapist if you don't have the credential for it. But you can use play therapy techniques and ideas and resources. I
had a sand tray in my office. The adults like the sand tray. I mean, I'll tell you, adults like to play, and they feel they don't get to play. So having toys in your office is it's great for everybody. Get a couple that's screaming at each other, give them some toys. But so, but I never call myself a play therapist. I just say I play in therapy. So that's when I would tell my students, don't ever call yourself what you're not. But yeah, so play is really the main intervention. It's not rocket science. So there's things you may see clients who had issues as infants and they have never recognized because, of course, they're infants. They won't know. They won't impact them. But yet they're in your office because of residual or triggers from that. I was supervising a student therapist who had a teenager come in who was having extreme anxiety over blood. Well, a lot of people get worried over blood. No, just extreme anxiety, any drop of blood. She was a female. She was having trouble with her menstrual cycle, the bleeding. It just really freaked her out. She was being cared for by her grandparents, and her history of her bio parents was just this big secret. And she finally got her older sister to tell her what happened. Father was in prison for life. He killed her mother in front. Both kids were in the home. She was an infant. Her sister was like 7. Her sister, he was trying to kill the whole family. He intended to kill the children as well with knives, not a gun or anything, knife. Like there was blood all over. The older child got the baby out of the house safely. Both of them did have cuts on them. And so they were able to get to the neighbor's house and be safe. Dad was arrested. Mom passed away. Her older sister had therapy. She didn't because she was, under a year. But she smelled the blood. And so she had a visceral memory. Her body held that memory. So I actually went to my infant mental health mentor, went to Joy Osofsky on this. Like, is this possible? Yes, it is. It is absolutely possible. So infants will remember things in different ways. Like you say, muscle memory. You develop muscle. Well, infants will remember sounds, sights, smells, and they can trigger trauma when they're older. So it's not crazy. And she processed through that memory. Her sister came in and talked to her. She went and she found articles about it in the library to read about it. She really wanted to know about it. The therapist first was like, I don't want her to re-traumatize, but she was old enough. She did this on her own and she brought things into therapy. So you don't just get rid of a trigger overnight, but it helped her understand the reason she was having these feelings and processing.
And she wasn't crazy, right? Yeah.
So it's really fascinating, but it's routine where, it used to be routine. It's not now, where police, law enforcement would say, oh, don't worry about that baby. They're not going to know. They're too little. They won't remember. Or they lost a parent. They won't remember that parent. We'll just take that baby from the mother at 6 months old and they won't know. We'll put that baby with another mother. Everything will be fine. But they do know. So we always have to think about, where did the baby come from? Where did this adult come from as a baby? What may have come with them? So, what other questions?
I think one thing that came up for me when you were talking about the 2-year-old, and Mom said she thought the 2-year-old was trying to strangle her. The first thing that came to mind for me was, where might she have seen that to, know to strangle mom? For mom to just
Good.
register that that was the only possibility that was happening there, is that she was trying to strangle. Because 2-year-olds are playful and they could be a little bit rough. But to the extent of I'm about to be strangled by my 2-year-old, that's a very interesting thought to land on.
Yeah, and that would have been a great question for me to have. I didn't ask her that, but that would have been a great question to say, wow, how might she have gotten that idea to strangle you? Wow. Yeah, that would have been a great question. I mean, you really have no idea when they're Baker acting 4-year-olds. Well, where might a 4-year-old get the idea to kill themselves?
Right.
Where did they learn these things? What's
They
going
don't
on?
even cognitively understand death yet.
Right. I worked right after my master's program in Texas for community mental health, the state hospital. We were the emergency responders, and so we did all the 911 and suicide assessments for the county. And I had an 8-year-old who tried to kill himself by putting a pillowcase over his head to suffocate himself. And the mom was like, oh, he didn't mean to do this. I'm just going to take him home. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe. And I was brand new, just out of my master's program, but we had to call the psychiatrist whenever we had an assessment. And I talked to him. He goes, no, you put that child in the hospital. I'm like, but it was a pillowcase. He goes, right. And next time it might be a plastic bag. He didn't know. He intended to kill himself. He didn't know that a pillowcase would allow him to breathe. So he'll go looking for something that is less porous. So put him in the hospital. It was like, well, that is an eye-opening learning experience for someone with a brand new master's degree. So where did he learn that? Even at 8, where does a kid learn to harm themselves? And there are 4-year-olds, they're kindergartners every day being Baker acted in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
I would say now it makes sense with all of the access
parents,
to what they
yes.
can watch and see,
Yeah.
phones
And
and
the
tablets
internet
and
and
things. And
yeah.
now, but I mean, many years ago, if that's going on, where do they get this stuff from?
Well, and Naya, you're connecting some dots for me. The parents aren't paying attention to the baby because they're so paying attention to that phone, right?
Right.
So that's another reason that kids are not getting the interaction, the attachment. So yeah, wow.
At pickup time, a child care center at pickup time, where the little ones have missed their parents all day. They're so happy. They're grabbing on them. They want to tell them, and the parent is either on the phone or they're spinning through. And, they've been working all day too. But there is that's such a good point, Lynn, a lot of disconnection between parents and children. And so then you get a whole family that's on their phone.
I think I've shared this with Dr. Schooley before. The majority of the cases that come into our office that are small children, they're there because we need to be seeing the family and the parents for the most part, not necessarily the child. So we get a lot of parents that throw their children into therapy and something's wrong, fix my child, when reality is the parents is not coping or dealing with their environment and their situation. And they're, putting it off on the child.
Yes.
Right. The problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why every intern I've ever had, I scream at them that why are you seeing that child by themselves? And then there are agencies that insist that the child be seen by themselves.
Right.
Because they're run by mental health counselors and social workers who don't have this training. Anyway, are there any other slides? I know I'm looking at time. Are there any other slides, Carol, that you want to share with your PowerPoint?
just the last slide, let me, has resources. Okay. So
If you share your screen, we'll see it. There we go.
is it there? Okay.
It's coming.
So
there it is.
Okay. So Florida Association for Infant Mental Health is a great resource. That's the link. There's all kinds of articles, there's providers, there's trainings, workshops, anything you're interested in, you can click on that. 0 to 3 below it, again, if those conferences are phenomenal, just if you're interested in postpartum depression, they have great presentations. 0 to 3 is a great organization. They have wonderful resources for parents too. So when you click on it, you can then get different avenues if you're a provider, if you're a parent, if you're, just different areas. The next one I put on the child trends, adverse childhood experiences, gives you a little bit more information. Children's Defense Fund has the data on what's happening around the country, and they update it every year. Michigan Association for Infant Mental Health has great resources. Bruce Perry runs the Child Trauma Academy. He is a psychiatrist. He's the one that worked for the children in Waco, the religious cult in Waco that had all the children in it that were being abused. And he wrote a phenomenal book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. And just really, he's done so much incredible work. So his website is interesting, but really more his writing, his books are really interesting. And then this one, Australia, New Zealand, Journal of Family Therapy, Volume 44. Oh, I didn't put the year. It's 2023. Issue 4. The entire journal is on infant mental health and family therapy. So whatever library you have access to, just pull up. Let me put I can. Let me put the year, 2023. Just pull up that journal, and the entire issue there's like 7 or 8 articles. It's really interesting. So that was really the only other thing I want to make sure I share, so you know what those resources are. And each one of them, when you go to the website, there's more resources. So you can, it's just a tip of the iceberg. It's a tip of the iceberg. And it really, when I was on YouTube looking for the video links, making sure they were still up to date, there's so many more videos now. Just fascinating. So there's a ton out there if you're interested in this. Oh, you're on mute, Annalyn.
I am. So I'm wondering, anyone have any final questions as we wrap up our presentation this evening? Anyone have any thoughts? I know that this is you've tapped into my first decade as a marriage and family therapist, where I did exclusively children and families. And I miss it. I really, you've reminded me how much I miss doing that work. And I'm fascinated by how many of new clinicians don't want to work with children. They want to work with individuals and couples. They don't want to work with kids. And or they don't have the opportunity, or they don't bring in the family. They work with, like, they may be in a school placement, but they're really, they have no way of, or they don't think they have a way of bringing in the family. And so you've re-sparked that. Yes, Robin.
I'll say, though, working only through a video platform, I don't feel comfortable in having the resources, to be able to effectively work with.
Way tougher. Yeah, way tougher.
So I primarily see couples, or, I have some individual women who are struggling with postpartum. So I see, maybe there's a baby on the screen. But I don't feel like, I can effectively
But
treat
so
kids
so
anymore.
then you could bring the baby though into those individual sessions
Yeah,
and
right.
have and be
Yeah.
more mindful of watching that is what I think what you're saying,
Oh,
Carol,
absolutely.
even on video.
Yeah.
I know people are doing it. I agree with you, Robin. That's how after COVID, I was like, I like this telehealth thing. I think I'm going to pay that rent anymore. But I know that there's therapists that are working with young children, and they do things. They develop a kit. So when they get a new client, they mail a kit or deliver the kit to the family with different toys in it. But it's a lot more difficult to do it in telehealth. I'm with you.
Yeah. And I think that's really clever. I'm just not at that stage anymore.
Right. I think you have to be.
So my agency, we do provide our families like little, we call it family engagement kits. And it's just a little pouch and it's a mini deck of cards, a little checkers board, like, all of these little games that's foldable, able to put in this pouch. And we encourage them to, Mom, carry it in your purse. So when you stop at McDonald's, sit down at McDonald's and do these little games with the kids and stuff like that. We highly encourage that.
Oh, great. That's
I
I
can
will
tell
great.
you
say, I have
that
one other comment.
Go
I
ahead.
do think that there is a time and place for individual play therapy. I'm just thinking anecdotally. So my grandchildren are experiencing a divorce of their parents, and they're older kids. And so the play therapist has really been very helpful in having activities in which they can express themselves. So my granddaughter, who's 10, loves going to this therapist because
That's good.
really allows her to express which, she shouldn't be able to express, it's just not appropriate, I think. So it's really worked out very well for my daughter. And,
Right. Probably easier for her not to have one of the parents in the room.
right, because she's not going to be able to.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
playing. So she'll
Right.
talk more as she plays.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But as an MFT, of course, with the idea is to move to where she can. Yeah. And unfortunately, that's where play therapists stop. They don't sometimes.
Well,
I mean, some that I know.
there is
Yeah.
no family play therapy. There's one model that was developed.
Yep. Yep. Well, and I can tell you that the play therapy community, when the pandemic started, just rushed in and started to create all these resources for doing play therapy in a virtual setting. So, if that's something that you're interested in, there's a whole bunch of resources there that could be folded into what, Carol, you've been presenting around this idea of using play in family therapy. Same kinds of ideas. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much, Carol, for your time this evening, and I so appreciate this topic that almost nobody talks about ever, and so thank you very much, and for all of you participants, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording now.